What's happening, guys, and welcome back to the channel. First things first, make sure you smash a like on the video and subscribe to the channel if you're new. And tomorrow evening, it is the big one. It's finally arrived. It is England versus Germany at Wembley. A lot of history over the years in this fixture. We've had, obviously, the famous 5-1 in Munich all those years ago. We had the World Cup 2010, where Frank Lampard's goal, which was miles over the line, wasn't given. But none of that really matters or has any bearing on tomorrow evening's clash. So, George, heading into this last 16 tie tomorrow night, England on the back of a solid but not spectacular group stage whatsoever. Quite a lot of criticism from a lot of fans about the football being played, the lack of chances being created given the talent we've got. Are you expecting Gareth Southgate to continue employing his defensive tactics going into this game?
Well, firstly, what a huge occasion this is, not just historically, but I think, they always tend to be good matches against the Germans. And what I would say is that this is probably the weakest German side we've faced in a long time. So I do fancy our chances going forward. And subsequently, looking at the draw, I mean, it's opened right up. If you think about Holland getting crashed out by the Czechs yesterday. And the fact that, even Belgium, who got through yesterday, have got some injury concerns with some of their key players. So, I expect the 4-2-3-1 to remain because I wouldn't, the results have suggested that it's a working formula. I understand from, a fan's point of view, and I know you are heavily critical of this type of football being played, but we all know that it's not vintage, but when has it ever been vintage with England? That's what I would say. I mean, even when you talk about the golden age, we weren't ever really vintage in tournament football. We seem to have a very a disconnect, between qualifying and tournament football, because even looking at Southgate's record, it's just as good as all the rest. Roy Hodgson had a fantastic qualifying record. Sven the same, but when it came to tournaments, we struggle, and this is going to be our first real big test. So plenty of questions to be asked. I wouldn't be surprised if he changed it. I've heard, listening into Sky Sports, which I'm sure everyone's been doing, that they have been practicing the three at the back as well, which is something that we did at the World Cup. So again, as I've said throughout the whole tournament, I wouldn't be shocked whichever way he goes, and I back whichever way he goes, because at the moment I'm a huge fan of Southgate, and I think people don't give him a lot of credit just because he's not a big club manager, but I think he knows the players better than anyone else, and so far so good.
And just sort of coming on to some of those questions, George, you just touched on it. Would you be surprised, given that we've employed a 4-2-3-1 for all of the group stage games, to then completely tear up that tactic and go and revert to a three at the back for this game?
It's so difficult because it's the first thing that people are going to look at if it goes wrong, isn't it? Why did he change the formation when we were winning? And this game, I do believe, is going to be won or lost in the midfield with how good they are in midfield. I think that's probably their most luxury position that they've got. I don't think they're great at the back, and they don't really have a recognised centre forward either. So, we've got to combat, Tony Kroos and all the rest of it. So I would expect him to go with the 4-2-3-1. And I therefore think, the likes of Mount won't be included. I think it would be a bit of a risk, considering I don't think he was playing particularly well anyway when he was playing. And as much as I like Mount, I don't expect him to make any changes from the last game. We might see Phil Foden come back into the fold. Jack Grealish again there's question marks all over the pitch. That's the difficult thing for Southgate.
Yeah, I think just to touch on that Mason Mount point, obviously, like in previous press conference, Southgate has said that there's virtually no chance of him and Chilwell being involved, considering their isolation finishes the evening before the game. But then he slightly backtracked on that, I think, in his press conference either today or yesterday, saying that there is a chance he could be involved. Do you think, as you said, Mount's not been outstanding, not really been standout in the two games that he's played? Do you think it would be a mistake to put him straight back into the lineup, considering he's not played since the Scotland game? He's been in isolation. He's been training on his own. He's not been training with the group at all. Could be different tactics. He's missed out on all that sort of information. Do you think that would be a mistake to put him in the lineup?
This is why I'd be such a bad manager, because I'm so indecisive. Because you could look at it and swing out all the positives and say, well, he's going to be fresh. Maybe it's what we need. Germany might not expect it, so that might be something that they haven't looked at particularly. Mount might be desperate because he realizes that he hasn't played well, itching to get back, and might give us that energy that we need. But I think when you're preparing for a game like this, I think, you've got to go with the players that have been through the process from start to finish. So that's being on the training ground, being involved with the players, being in those briefings, as you mentioned. So I don't expect him to feature for me. But again, if he started, am I going to really complain? He's had a fantastic season at Chelsea. We all know that. And he can do those killer passes and that creativity that everyone was screaming for. I mean, Jack Grealish, when he came on, very good first half the other day. It did tail off. So no one's a shoo-in in that kind of final third of the pitch, I would argue.
And just moving away from the midfield, obviously there's a few questions to be answered in the back line. Obviously, Jordan Pickford's definitely going to play, and you'd expect, if we're going with a back four, as we presume, we would expect Harry Maguire and John Stones to continue. Where do you stand on the fullbacks? Do you think that Kieran Trippier could come back in at left back? Southgate's been saying, that we've really struggled on set pieces and our delivery. He's got a good delivery. Could we perhaps see him back in the lineup? And do you think it's going to be Kyle Walker or Reece James in right back?
I think right back will be Kyle Walker. I think he's the more established of the two. I think this is one area where I feel very confident that he wouldn't change it, because why would you change a side that's kept clean sheets all the way through the tournament? Yes, I obviously that hasn't been the same back four. I know Tyrone Mings has featured. Trippier played the first game, so you can't say that it's the same back four that have kept all the clean sheets. But I think as a unit, it was our best performance, in terms of solidarity last game. So I don't see why you would change it, start tweaking a back line that's now Maguire's back fit, so he'll play alongside Stones. Walker's definitely, I think, the best that we've got, and I think he's pretty set on Shaw. We have, if he wanted to see Chilwell, it would have been in the group stages. So it would be very odd for me for him to get any sort of game time now, unless there's an injury. And for Trippier, I don't know. He's probably got the best delivery, but is that enough to warrant a start? That's what I would say. I would keep Shaw in.
Yeah, I would agree with you. I don't think in a big game like this one you want to be tinkering around with your back line. I think I think virtually it picks itself, as you said, Kyle Walker, Maguire, Stones, and then Luke Shaw. I don't see any reason to deviate away from that. And one area that is going to be interesting, you mentioned at the start, George, the Germans very good in midfield with the likes of Toni Kroos, Ilkay Gundogan, Goretzka, Kimmich as well, who obviously may end up playing at right back. We're not sure. That midfield is outstanding. Some top players, and you'd have to say it's a lot better than England's. Are you expecting to see just the two in there again, Declan Rice and Calvin Phillips? I thought it was quite interesting that Jordan Henderson played 45 minutes against the Czech Republic. Do you think that that's perhaps hinting that he may take one of those starting berths?
Really good point, mate. I completely, that was an oversight for me. I think Henderson might play. I really do. And again, this might be a downfall of Southgate's, but I think he fears the Germans in midfield, and he thinks, is Rice and Phillips going to be able to handle the experience and quality of that midfield? It's fair play if he lets them, and trusts them to do it. But I think we get totally outrun and totally done if we play Rice and Phillips. So it's a question of whether he trusts them to do the job, or whether he's going to bring in the tried and tested Henderson, which, again, it's a bit of a risk because he's not been in form. He doesn't really still seem very fit, but he has got those qualities of leadership. And, what you will get from Henderson is that he'll go for everything, and he'll give it 100%. So, again, tough one. But I think that's a really good point, mate.
Yeah, to be honest, it depends on what formation he goes with. He might even switch it up to a 4-3-3 in essence, and he might think Calvin Phillips is an outstanding tournament. I think it would be very harsh for him to miss out. Declan Rice has been solid, not spectacular. I wonder if he thinks, well, I might leave those two in, and to combat that midfield, I might just put Henderson in as well, because he's not like creative like a Foden or a Mount, etc., but he's a bit more forward thinking. So it's possible that he could line up with the three of them in midfield. But yeah, that was just a thought on Henderson. It would be odd to give him 45 minutes and then not really use him from the start against the Germans. In terms of the forward line, George, obviously, you know, Harry Kane struggled for chances and opportunities yet to get off the mark in this tournament. He'll obviously play, and it's fairly obvious that Southgate is a big fan of Sterling. Sterling's obviously a favourite of his. It would be a big shock if he wasn't on the list. Who do you expect to start on the other side? You know, you've got the likes of Jadon Sancho, you've got the likes of Grealish, Rashford, and then obviously Bukayo Saka, who massively impressed against the Czechs. There's a big call to be made on that side, as well as Phil Foden also.
Yeah, again, I don't envy Southgate's job at all because, you know, whichever way it goes, he'll be the man that's got the target on his back. I personally think Saka has to start because of his performance in the last game. That might be not a popular opinion, but I think we were screaming for someone to just, you know, take the game by the scruff of the neck and go for it with no fear. And that's exactly what Saka did in that game. Again, the responsibilities, the level up playing Germany, maybe there are question marks over, again, Saka's experience and him tracking back and doing the defensive duties. But going forward, mate, he was by far the best player on the pitch the other day, creating all the chances. So, I don't know, but it really is a toss-up, mate. You know, Jack Grealish had a great 45 minutes the other day. Sterling scored again, and he'll probably play on the left. So, you know, but then we haven't seen Sancho really, and Rashford. You know, Rashford again, his finishing is not great, but he offers something else. So it's really, really hard. Really hard.
It is a tough call, and it could be a number of them. I've got to be honest. I think I share the same thought as a lot of England fans. I'll be very, very disappointed if Jack Grealish is not starting from the off. We're not going to get a lot of chances in this game, and we need our most creative players on the pitch, particularly if Mason Mount's not looking like playing. I think for me, it would be criminal if Jack Grealish doesn't start. Saka is a difficult one, as you said. It's all very well playing well in a dead rubber against the Czechs at Wembley, but a step up against Germany with a much higher caliber of opposition, could that be a step too far for him? And maybe we'd be better off going with some experience or better quality with someone like maybe Phil Foden, or, I mean, Rashford's not been great. Sancho doesn't seem like he's getting a look in. I personally would go with Jack Grealish, but I've just got a really bad feeling that he's not going to start. I just don't think Southgate likes him. I think it's clear. But George, before we wrap up, just a quick word on the Germans. Where are you expecting them to be dangerous? Obviously, we've touched on the midfield. At the back, they seem to be employing a three at the back. They've not got the best defence. Obviously, they've got Antonio Rudiger, who we know from Chelsea, Mats Hummels, the veteran, and then they seem to be playing Joshua Kimmich, who's well known as a midfielder, one side, and Robin Gosens the other side in the wing back role. So you've done okay. The forward line's got a lot of pace. Do you expect the likes of Kai Havertz, Serge Gnabry, Leroy Sané to cause England a few problems?
Yeah, I mean, this is where we'll be tested. I think that midfield and wide areas from Germany is where it's going to be doom or you know, stick or twist for us, because we haven't been tested yet. We've had a lot of control of the game, all the possession, and maybe this will work for us, you know, being the underdogs and being on the break, and maybe those players that we've got going forward get a bit more space. You know, I think particularly where Kane struggled is that he's had his back to goal a lot. He's had to come a lot deeper to receive the ball. And I think in this game, you would expect Germany to have a lot more of the ball, and therefore we'll be sitting back and looking for those counter-attack punches. So listen, Germany are very dangerous. And that's why I think, you know, when people are getting a little bit over the top saying it's, you know, it's outrageous and it's a failure if we get knocked out this stage. Okay, if you look at it as a last 16, it is. But we're playing the Germans. You know, the Germans are one of the best tournament sides in history. So to lose to the Germans it's not embarrassing for me. It's not a failure for me. I think, you know, they are much better than us in terms of quality.
I mean, I don't know if they're much better in terms of quality. They're definitely better in terms of, you know-how and experience. You know, they've got a lot more players that have been there and done it. A lot more players with experience at the highest level in club football, etc. I am of the belief that this is basically a home tournament for England. Every game's been played at Wembley, and whatever way you want to dress it up as, this is not a vintage German side. With the quality we've got in the team, this is the best chance we'll have of probably beating Germany in a tournament. And for me, if you go out in the last 16 of a home tournament, it doesn't matter how you dress it up. That can't be anything other than a failure, because that was not the objective, the last 16. We know we're going to be playing good sides. If we're ever going to progress and get to where we need to be, we've got to be beating this kind of team. And you know, for me, the last 16 in a home tournament is a massive failure, and questions would have to be asked. But George, last thing, a score prediction from yourself for the big game tomorrow. What we're going for?
Oh, go on. Let's go out there. Let's say we're going to beat the Germans on pens. Go on.
You think you think it's going to go all the way? You think it's going to go all the way to the pens?
I think it might go to extra time because I think both teams will score. I think we'll finally concede a goal, and yeah, I do think it's going to be close. Because you know, even when we lost them in the World Cup all those years ago, it was such a mismatch. You know, we had players like Matthew Upson at the back, and we just got. And even then, you know, if we got that goal from Lampard, it would have been a different game. I'm convinced. So yeah, I think I'm going to go for it. Go on, England beat Germany on penalties. Why not?
That's a very, very, very bold call. To wrap this video up, I've got to be realistic. I think the Germans will probably beat us 2-1. I wouldn't be surprised to see it go to extra time, but I do expect England will probably be going home. I hope that's not the case, but yeah, that's just myself and George's thoughts heading into the big game. As always, guys, leave your thoughts in the comments below if you agree with us or not. And yeah, make sure you smash a like on the video, subscribe to the channel, and we'll catch you in the match preview where it's either going to be good news or bad news. So yeah, we'll catch you in the next one, guys.